Hi, Roby kids. So happy snowy Monday. Today we're going to try something new. This is called a screencast. So what you are doing is you're going to listen to me give you your reading mini lesson today. Now I do have the Google Slides uploaded in Google Classroom as well. So when you're done, I want you to go back and I want you to take a look at these and go through them before you do the assignment today. But today we're going to talk about building action in a play. So recounting key details in a drama. So a play is also known as a drama. So you're going to hear me use those words interchangeably, meaning I'm going to switch them out sometimes. But our main goal today is to recount a story using a story mountain or a plot mountain. And we know that all great stories have beginning, middles, and ends. And you may know that from kindergarten all the way through second grade. You always were told to tell the beginning, the middle, and the end of the story. Well, today we're going to kick it up a notch. We're going to talk about how do we look at more detailed ways to retell a story, and that's using a story mountain. So here's our objectives for today. We're going to be able to read a play and be able to explain how that scene builds upon an earlier scene. And we're going to use the story mountain tool to do that. Share ideas with others. We're also going to be recounting and writing our drama or our story. So that's going to be your learning target for today. Now, we know great readers know each part of their story is connected, meaning that when an author sets out to write a story, they don't just leave you hanging all the time. Or they, just say, oh, that character went to the store, they got some groceries, the end, right? That'd be a very boring story. No one would want to read that. And so, great authors and even playwrights, people who write plays, really focus on a plot mountain or a story mountain to drive their story. Usually there's a problem and a solution and coming up with those examples of what to do. So great authors recount those stories with plot mountains. And so here we have a video by Scratch Garden. I'm not going to play it for you today because I have only a certain amount of time I can screencast. So make sure you go back and watch this video. The song's very catchy and it helps you understand plot mountains a little bit more. Now, we know every drama has a plot or a story mountain. Now, our story mountain is really divided up into 5 main parts. So it starts off with the introduction. So every story starts out by telling you the main character and where is the story taking place or what time is it taking place. And that's found at the base of our mountain. So before our characters even start out on their journey, you have to know where are they, who are they. Now later on, you're talking about the rising action. So like we're climbing up that mountain. We're getting ready, we're starting our journey off, and there's going to be a problem that the character has to face. So there has to be some kind of bump along the path that's going to drive that story forward. Now, up at the top of the mountain, you finally get to the top, and there's going to be really that turning point for that character. Something is going to get worse. Now, please excuse the typo here, gotten. Gotten is not a real word. But we're talking about how does that problem get worse over this period of time? What are some of the super challenges that character now feels like they can't overcome? It's kind of like that moment in a movie or a show where you just hold your breath because you don't know what's going to happen. Okay, maybe your character is getting really close to that villain, and that villain is figuring it out, and so they're going to have a huge battle, right? That would be a climax of the story. Now, after the climax happens, that story has to start trying to wrap up, and they call that the falling action. And that is talking about how did that problem improve? Okay, so the character's trying to fix that problem. Maybe they're coming up with a solution on how to beat that villain, and they finally figured out a way to get better. And at the end, what we have is called the resolution, or how does the problem get resolved. So today, that's our goal. We're going to look at our text for close reading and see, can we plot our introduction? Can we plot the rising action? Can we find the climax in our story? So that's what we're going to do today for our mini lesson. So I have here, I was able to screen cast the text for close reading. So right now, we're going to look at that Cinderella Too Much for Words by Gera Thompson. And I was able to do this on Benchmark Universe, and this is on pages 6 and 7. So now that we're at Benchmark Universe and we're looking at our text for close reading, um, right away you're going to notice that a play looks completely different than a chapter book or a storybook. And so one way that they are different is that Garrett Thompson, the playwright for Cinderella Too Much for Words, they put the characters at the start of the story. So our characters, it says in order of appearance, meaning that this is the order that the characters appear in the story or where they show up. So the first character we're going to see is stepsister number 1, Cinderella's older stepsister, the stepmother, and then stepsister number 2, which is Cinderella's younger stepsister. Now, the playwrights do this because, think about it, if you are going to perform a play, you have to know who do you need to cast in your story, or who do you need to have an actor for each of those characters. Otherwise, your play couldn't go on for an audience. Now, they also have to tell you the setting beforehand. That's because, again, if you were performing this in a theater or in an auditorium, you're going to have that backdrop so that way the audience can visualize the story. So, our setting right away, it says 2 bedrooms in the tower of a palace in a forest, a morning in June 1549. So, we know who the main characters are. We know this is taking place in a palace in a forest, and the morning is 1549. And one thing that's also different is our scenes. So the reason why they have scenes is because that's the way that they break up the text. So if you're familiar with the chapter book, we break up the text into chunks named chapters. Well, in plays, they break up our chunks of our story into what we call scenes. So scene 1 really just means chapter 1, the stepsister's number 1 bedroom. So it's telling you, where is this scene taking place? So right now I'm going to hit pause for a second because I want you to also hit pause. I want you to read this section, that's scene number 1 on pages 6 and 7. And I want you to think, can you identify the introduction of the story? Meaning that can you identify those characters, that setting? Maybe you already know, right? Look at this page. Do we already know this setting and characters? I bet we do. And we're looking for, do we start having that rising action? Remember, the rising action is the problem in the story. Is there a problem that's going to come up? All right, so hit pause. I want you to read this scene, and then we're going to resume in a second. So you hit pause, and when you're ready, I want you to hit play again. All right? Good. All right. Hopefully you read that scene number 1 on pages 6 and 7 in your text for close reading. Now, if you haven't, go back, rewind this video, go back, because now we're going to talk about that story mountain. So we're going to fill out that graphic organizer in Google Slides together. So our title for story was Cinderella Too Much for Words, and our author is Garrett Thompson. So we put this down, that way whoever reads our graphic organizer will be able to really know what story did we read. Now, let's talk about the introduction. That's the first part in Story Mountain. And the question was, who is the main character? What have we learned about the setting? Do you know who the main characters of our story are? Do you know the setting of our story? Well, if we look back at our text for close reading, we know plays set them up right ahead of time. So hopefully you were able to answer this question with the characters are stepsister number 1, stepmother, and stepsister number 2. And the setting is the palace in the forest. And I just spelled forest wrong. Sorry, guys. In 1549. So hopefully you're able to see that setting and the characters. And that's right here in our text. Is it okay for you to go back and look at it? Of course. All right. So now we need to figure out, do we know the rising action or the problem that the character is starting to face? Well, in our first scene, scene number 1 in stepsister number 1's bedroom, we can clearly see that rising action. So in this scene, we see how stepsister number 1 complains to the stepmother about Cinderella for things like not keeping her room warm, right? She says, "What if my bare feet touch the cold floor? You know I'm delicate," right? So she's upset that her room isn't warm. We also know that stepsister number 1's complaining about Cinderella for putting the wrong fruit in her porridge. Okay, and she says right here, she's like, and that is not all. She put strawberries on my porridge. So, and we later find out, according to stepmother, that that's her fourth favorite fruit. How silly is this lady being, right? She's being so silly. But we can see clearly that in this scene that the stepmother and stepsister number one, they're not really happy with Cinderella and they're upset with her. And so we can see that stepmother is saying, I need to go tend to your sister screaming. Calling. So I wonder as a reader, is this problem going to keep happening? Is stepsister number two going to also have that same problem of being upset with Cinderella? That's what at least what I'm thinking. So, can we answer this question? Do we know what problem has the main character started to face? I think we do. Let's reveal it. Stepsister number one is complaining to her stepmother about Cinderella for not doing her job right. So that is our main problem. We're starting to see that they're getting upset. And I wonder if this climax is going to be the problem getting worse. So I bet maybe the stepsister gets mad too. Let's take a look at scene number 2. So I'm going to flip my text for close reading page. And right now I want you to hit pause because I want you to read scene number 2. Okay, go ahead, hit pause, and I'll be right here when you get back. All right, so hopefully now you've read scene number 2. Hopefully, and if you haven't, you need to go back and check. All right, so when we're looking at scene number 2, we're trying to see, is that problem getting worse? Are we building upon scene number 1? Meaning that, is it going to start growing into more? So are we going up that story mountain? Okay, so what is that problem? What happened in this scene? Well, as I read scene 2, I'm starting to think about that climax. Okay, what am I noticing? Well, I'm noticing that stepsister number 2 is also complaining about her room being cold. And now she's saying that her porridge is cold. Okay? And she's claiming that Cinderella is trying to trick her by putting her most favorite fruit into her porridge. Okay? And I think that's so silly, right? She threw away the strawberries as if they were blueberries. She's trying to think that Cinderella's trying to trick her. And so I also see that the stepsisters are going to a ball, but now they're not going to allow Cinderella to go. So that really is kind of changing the story of what's going on here and adding to that drama. So now not only is stepsister number 1 mad, but stepsister number 2 and the stepmother are not very happy with Cinderella. So I'm going to reveal that as my climax. So everyone's upset, and now she's not going to be able to go to the ball. Now, because of our play really kind of ends abruptly. It doesn't really have that conclusion. And honestly, I think we could write a scene 3 and a scene 4 for this play if we really wanted to. But Benchmark, they didn't do scene 3 and 4, so we're kind of left on that cliffhanger. So we're really not able to see how are those problems going to improve. Does Cinderella, not going to the ball, does that fix her? Does she start treating the stepsisters with more respect? We don't know. Now, we can infer based on other stories we read about Cinderella, but we really don't know in Gare Thompson's story. So I'm actually going to leave these 2 boxes blank. But you can see that each part of our story is building upon each other in this story mountain. Now, I think it's your turn to give this a shot. Okay, so on the next page, see if you can recount a plot or a story in one of the books that you have at home. Now, it doesn't have to be Cinderella, too much for words. Matter of fact, it shouldn't be because we just did that as a class. But I want you to pick maybe a picture book that you could read with your brother or sister, or maybe a smaller chapter book, and you can kind of try to map out that story mountain arc. Now, if you notice here on the next slide, I have a one that you can type in. So if you want to go back and type into this graphic organizer, go for it. I actually highly recommend that you do that. I think it'll be a lot easier. But if for some reason you would rather write it in, go ahead and write it in on the PDF on the assignment. All right, guys, good luck. And if you need help, I'm always here. All right, bye, guys.